This week from Al-Musawat Radio. Al-Musawat Radio is the right place to know everything. Welcome to all of you, dear listeners. This is the weekly news coverage coming your way with This Week from Al-Musawat radio station. And the beginning goes with Unanimous calls to de-escalate the ongoing tensions in Iraq. The United Nations mission in Iraq calls for a halt to the escalation, confirming in a statement that the ongoing escalation is extremely worrying and that voices of reason and wisdom are necessary to prevent further violence and encourage all players to stop the escalation for the benefit of the Iraqi people. European Union calls on the Iraqi parties to maintain restraint and to resort to political dialogue, voicing concern about the ongoing protest and the possible escalation in Baghdad, and stressing the importance of respecting laws and state institutions and the need for political forces to resolve issues through constructive political dialogue within the constitutional frameworks. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad announces the United States of America support for Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi's recent call on all parties to participate in a constructive national dialogue that can lead to calming the current tensions, reaffirming U.S. support for peaceful protest and to encourage all parties to commit to non-violence and the rule of law within constitutional rights. The British ambassador to Iraq, Mark Bryson, urged all political parties to exercise restraint and reduce escalation, confirming that the freedom to demonstrate peacefully and respect the institutions and property of the state is an important part of a healthy democracy. Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces Mustafa al-Kadhimi calls for the formation of a committee that includes representatives from all parties to develop a roadmap for a solution under the roof of Iraqi synergy and the mechanisms of national dialogue. His Grace Patriarch Cardinal Luis Rafael Sacco calls for calm and for a national dialogue to remedy the blockage of the political horizon, noting that it is imperative to read the situation in depth and evaluate it seriously, whilst politicians should acknowledge the failure of the sectarian and power-sharing approach that brought corruption and injustice, and must carefully review their considerations and make some sort of concessions in order to save the country by initiating a brotherly dialogue and a responsible national spirit to find an effective new political approach that builds the state and serves the Iraqi people. The Speaker of Parliament, Mohammed al-Halbousi, decides to suspend Parliament sessions until further notice, calling all the leaders and political blocs to an urgent national meeting to achieve an effective and responsible national dialogue whose outcomes are for the sake of the country, and to give priority to its interests over all partisan and factional interests, and to come together on one opinion that preserves the country and the capabilities of the people, and expresses Iraq from this crisis that the people have long waited for to be resolved. Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Shahwan Abdullah Ahmed, directs not to attack the demonstrators and directs the protection regiment of the Parliament building not to use force or attack the demonstrators who entered the Parliament building to express their opinion and their will their will must be respected, calling on demonstrators to preserve peaceful demonstrations, not harming or encroaching on government buildings, and protecting state institutions. The Ministry of Defense stresses that the Iraqi army is at the service of the people and the duty of the security forces to protect demonstrators and public and private property, and the Iraqi army, with all its leaders and affiliates, are at the service of the Iraqi people and maintain an equal distance from all the components of the Iraqi people. Prime Minister Mustafa Kalimi posted a tweet in solidarity with the Yazidi people, remembering the genocide committed by the terrorist gang of ISIS against the Yazidis, of which he says, "We remember with heavy hearts the heinous crime against our Iraqi Yazidis. Fairness and justice for your cause are inevitable, as your deep-rooted presence in the great land of Iraq cannot be relinquished. When your presence is a beating heart of brotherhood and love for all the Iraqi people." President of the Republic Ahmed Salah stresses that the retribution of those involved in the genocide committed by the terrorist gangs of ISIS against the Yazidis is a duty and a right that will not fall, noting to the importance of continuing the efforts of the United Nations and the international community to hold those involved in this crime against humanity accountable and bring them to justice, and to expose and document violations so that future generations and the world will witness the manners of terrorist groups that have tried to tamper with our country. President of the Republic Ahmed Salah confirms that the approval of the Yazidi survivors law is the least duty towards the genocide committed by the terrorist gangs of ISIS against the Yazidis, and we must continue to work on fairness, compensation and empowerment of the victims, and to ensure the safe and stable return of the displaced Yazidis to their city of Sinjar and its reconstruction, in addition to revealing about 2,700 kidnapped whose fate is still unknown, and enhancing the local and international efforts to achieve this without complacency. The Ministry of Health announces that the number of the injuries in the latest demonstrations has risen to 125, including 25 soldiers, affirming the continuation of the mobilization of its institutions to rescue and treat the wounded and to provide all necessary health measures, in addition to the continuation of providing various other health services. Digital Media Center denounces the ongoing fake paid hashtags on the Twitter platform by followers of well-known parties, despite the calls for calm that were launched, stressing the importance for the competent government agencies to move to address this problem because of its negative and catastrophic effect on the societal peace in our country. The Joint Operations Command reveals the preparation of special plans to secure the borders with Turkey, as indicated by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Prime Minister Mustafa Kalimi, for the purpose of completing the procedures in order to close the loopholes to prevent any infiltration and to maintain the security and safety of the borders, noting that it is the first time that the Iraqi flag has been raised on the border's intersection with Turkey. A number of Iraqi provinces called last Thursday a day off in exception of the menstrual exams due to rising temperatures reaching 50 degrees centigrade, whilst the Iraqi Meteorological Organization and Seismology issued a warning to citizens in this regard. The security media cell announces the arrest of 10 terrorists in Kirkuk, Nineveh and Samarra, including a terrorist network, clarifying that the Military Intelligence Directorate will continue to carry out tactical and preemptive operations targeting ISIS terrorist gangs, their collapsed remnants, and their miserable cells. The National Security Service announces the arrest of 6 terrorists in Nineveh, illustrating that the National Security Detachments in Nineveh Governorate, and after intensifying the intelligence effort, succeeded to arrest 6 terrorists whom judicial arrest warrants were issued in separate areas of the province during the past days, noting that all the accused were handed over to the competent legal authorities to take the necessary measures against them. Iraqi National Security Service announces the arrest of 31 suspects in cases of electronic extortion during the months June and July, after receiving complaints from citizens regarding their exposure to cases of electronic extortion and obtaining judicial approvals, illustrating that the operations resulted in the overthrow of 31 blackmailers who tried to exploit female victims by bargaining with them for sums of money, whilst the accused were submitted to the competent judicial authorities to receive their just punishment in accordance with the law. Iraqi Federal Police announces the arrest of 2 wanted persons in cases of human trafficking in Baghdad, noting that a force from the 5th Brigade, the 2nd Division Federal Police, in cooperation with Federal Intelligence and Investigation Agency detachments and the Anti-Human Trafficking Detachment, succeeded to arrest 2 suspects for whom an arrest warrant was issued in accordance with the provisions of Article 18 of the Human Trafficking Law, following a monitoring and investigation operation in Al-Ghazaliya neighborhood, western Baghdad. Iraqi Federal Police announces the arrest of a wanted person in narcotics trafficking case in Baghdad, noting that a force from the 2nd Brigade, 1st Division Federal Police, in cooperation with the brigade's intelligence detachments, succeeded to arrest a wanted suspect in accordance with the provisions of Article 32 in Al-Shama'iyya neighborhood, eastern Baghdad, as the arrestee, along with the duly seized materials, were submitted to the competent authorities to complete all the necessary legal and investigative procedures against him. Iraqi National Intelligence Service has carried out a qualitative operation against a foreign drug trafficking network in Baghdad, resulted in the arrest of its members, noting that an Iraqi person collaborating with the network was also arrested, as a quantity of marijuana drugs was seized in the possession of the captured network. Security Media Cell announces the arrest of 2 terrorists as a force of the 5th, 10th, and 16th Divisions in cooperation with military intelligence and a force from the Ground Forces Command, succeeded to arrest 2 terrorists in accordance with Article 4 of the Anti-Terrorism Law, one in Al-Anbar province and the other in Nineveh province. Security Media Cell reports security forces managed to seize multiple types of ammunitions from the remnants of ISIS in the areas south of Rutbah and north of International Highway in Al-Anbar province. The Federal Intelligence and Investigation Agency at the Ministry of Interior announces the arrest of 80 infiltrators and the filing of smuggling operations on the Iraqi borders within the past 2 months. As the detachments of the Federal Intelligence and Investigation Agency in the Ministry of Interior succeeded to arrest 80 people of different nationalities during their attempt to infiltrate across the Iraqi border and foiled a number of smuggling operations for different materials during last June and July. The Ministry of Oil announces the completion of a new oil well in Al-Zubair field, illustrating that the technical and engineering staff of the company completed the drilling of the 7th well as part of the contract with Italian oil company ENI to drill 37 oil wells in Al-Zubair oil field, noting that the company is currently operating in accordance with Integrated Management System (IMS) to keep pace with global work on regulations and standards. Ministry of Oil sets the objectives of the OPEC Plus meeting with the participation of Iraq and confirms Iraq's participation is significant and effective, and also confirms that OPEC Plus doesn't neglect the gains that has achieved during the past period. OPEC Plus illustrates that its meeting aims to follow up and discuss developments in the oil market and to review the technical reports actually prepared by the research authorities in the organization on the reality of the global market, the variabilities, influences, and current and future expectations, and all the factors and conditions surrounding the global markets that may lead to an imbalance between supply and demand. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries (OPEC) announces that Iraq's share of September crude oil production increase would reach 12,000 barrels per day, after OPEC Plus is set to raise its producers' oil output goal by 100,000 barrels per day, noting that Iraq is the second largest producer in the organization after Saudi Arabia and the third largest producer in OPEC Plus after Saudi Arabia and Russia. US President Joe Biden announces the killing of the Emir of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, in a raid in Kabul, Afghanistan, praising the high accuracy of the operation, illustrating that al-Zawahiri is involved in the killing of many American citizens and targeted American interests in several countries throughout several decades, stressing that his country would not allow Afghanistan to be a safe haven for terrorists. US State Department issues a warning to American citizens going overseas that they now might face a high risk of violence after the killing of Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri by US forces, advising them to keep a high level of vigilance and practice a good situational awareness. US Senate approved Sweden's and Finland's accession into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization (NATO) by a vote of 95 votes to 1 in favor of the accession of the two Scandinavian countries. The matter, which makes the 23rd country out of 30 NATO member countries that officially approved Sweden's and Finland's admission, whilst both Italy and France had earlier given their approval. US Congresswoman Jackie Walorski died at the age of 58 in a car accident while traveling in the state of Indiana. Besides, 2 members of her staff were also killed in the crash that occurred around Wednesday noon. whilst House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy posted a statement from Walorski's office confirming the Republican lawmaker's death. It's worth to mention that Walorski was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2012. Devastating floods caused by heavy rains get the death toll in the American state of Kentucky rise to 25 people, including several children, as local authorities warn of hazardous conditions, downed power lines and cell phone blackouts in many areas of the state, whilst search and rescue teams continue searching for survivors. The World Health Organization's European office warns of more monkeypox-related deaths can be expected, following reports of the first fatalities outside Africa, illustrating that severe complications were still rare, whilst the organization had declared the monkeypox outbreak a global health emergency last week. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen confirms its country's willingness not to back down and to continue to hold the line of defense for democracy amid China's mounting military threats. Germany's Minister of Justice Marco Buschmann recently announces his ministry is determined to embark upon legislative amendments that allow tighter penalties for violence against women offenses. On a related note, Germany's Minister of the Interior and Community Nancy Faeser confirms in a statement of hers that what occur are murders, and they must clearly named murders against women, as women get killed because they are women, when the government must acknowledge that we have a serious and grave problem that should be addressed. Women's rights activist Mariam Rahmani was sentenced to 2 years in prison and to a fine of 15 million tomans. On the other side, well-informed sources report that she may appeal against the sentence within 20 days from the date of its announcement. It's worth to mention that her trial was held at what's so-called Tehran's Revolutionary Court on July 11th of this current year. Labor activist Rayhana Ansari Najad is subjected to interrogation in the solitary confinement after her detention was extended 3 times. The third round of the extension of her detention ended on June 24, 2022. However, there is no information available on her, as she is not allowed to make calls from prison. Her family has carried out all legal proceedings set by the prosecutor's office to bail her out and are demanding their daughter's immediate release, but she is still under detention and interrogation at Evin Prison, northwest Tehran. The conservative U.S. state of Kansas has decided in a referendum to protect abortion rights in a major victory for pro-choice groups. Voters overwhelmingly said that they did not wish to amend the state constitution to revoke the right of abortion. It's worth to mention that this referendum is the first electoral test of the issue of abortion since the U.S. Supreme Court allowed states to ban abortion or not. The end of this week's news coverage. Stay tuned to Al-Musawat radio station. Please accept the best regards from me, your host, right here behind the mic, Taif najjar, and from the producer, right there behind the mixer, Ahmed Salah. Join us next week. Until then, have a nice day and goodbye.